Well, I am really glad to be with you. I am not Reverend Erin, you might have noticed, unless you're new, and then, I can be whoever you want me to be, but she is a very good friend of mine, so I'll try to channel her from time to time so you don't miss her too much. But I'm Reverend Robin, and I've been around Unity a day or two. Seems like a lifetime, but in a good way. So I'm going to be here with you the next 4 weeks as we explore Brené Brown's work, Rising Strong. And, I love the work of Brené Brown. I know you did her book, Daring Greatly, in the fall. And she really stands for authenticity, for vulnerability, for acknowledging our stories, acknowledging our truth, acknowledging the courage it takes to walk this human journey. And when I picked up this book, Rising Strong, I was on my way to Florida, and I had a stopover in Charlotte. And so between Kansas City and Charlotte, I read the beginning of the book. By the time I got to the Charlotte airport, I felt like I was just beaming love to people. I was just on this transformed state in which I felt her words touch me at such a profound level that it just opened something in me. And so I hope that you'll find, as we have this conversation over the next few weeks, that it also opens something in you. So her original book, Daring Greatly, was inspired by a portion of a speech by Teddy Roosevelt. And so I just want to recap a little piece of that as we begin today. He said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly." I love that idea about being in the arena that she talks about and took from this particular part of the speech, because what it means to be in the arena means that we are present in every moment of our life, in every life experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because it is part of this human journey to experience all of those moments. All of those moments make up who we are. And to be in the arena takes courage. To be in the arena means you show up authentically. It means you're willing to be vulnerable. It means you're willing to take chances, even knowing that you might fall a time or two. Our lives are comprised of a series of stories. One story may make up our day. One story may make up a year. One story may consume decades of our life. One story may take up an entire lifetime. But it is important that we look at our stories, that we own our stories. We love stories of redemption, don't we? Those stories where somebody triumphs in the end, where they overcome, where they rise up, where they become the hero. We love those kind of stories. But what happens right before the hero rises? What happens before someone overcomes? What happens before the celebration? Well, there's a whole middle part in there, isn't there? I mean, you can't rise unless you've fallen, right? You can't overcome if there wasn't something to overcome. There are many stories that we hear about people who have succeeded after a long journey of overcoming. The great actor Sidney Poitier, when he went to his first audition at the American Negro Theater, flubbed his line so badly that the director told him he should give it up and become a dishwasher. Many of you probably know that J.K. Rowling, when she began writing the Harry Potter series, was a single mom on welfare. There is story after story of people that have overcome, that have been through challenges, that have persevered. Walt Disney, who was fired from our own Kansas City Star because he lacked imagination. Oprah Winfrey, who was let go from her first TV station, and Lady Gaga, who was dropped from her first label. It's not always pretty, is it? And then Sir James Dyson, of the famous Dyson vacuum dynasty. He actually had 5,000 prototypes that failed, spent 15 years and his entire life savings before he came up with the vacuum that we have today. Now that's perseverance, isn't it? But see, we like to skip over those parts of the story that are challenging and uncomfortable, the hard parts. Sometimes we say we're focusing on the positive, but isn't it sometimes that we don't want to be in the discomfort of what comes before that? Have any of you, are any of you the types that when you get a novel and you start to read it and it gets suspenseful, you go to the last chapter and read that? See what happens? Oh, I know there's a couple of you out there. Well, we sometimes do that in our own lives, don't we? We skip to the part of the story where we have survived, where we have overcome our challenges. We go to the part where we're okay. And we tend to disown the parts that don't look so pretty, the times that we're not so comfortable, the times where we don't look so good. We tend to disown those parts of our story sometimes that are about loss and betrayal and challenge. And there are a lot of ways we do this, the ways we disown our story. One of the ways is that we minimize them. You know, we can always find somebody in the world that's suffering more than we are, right? And so we downplay our story because, somebody's got it worse. As if there's not enough compassion for everybody, like there's a limited amount, so we're going to give it to this person over here, but we don't deserve our own. Sometimes that's a way of focusing on someone else's pain and avoiding our own. We also disown our stories when we let our failures define us. Brené Brown talks about the difference between guilt and shame, and guilt being that helpful emotion that sometimes keeps us on track that may say, I have done something bad. Whereas shame is something that defines us, that says, I am bad. When we let our stories become about shame, we miss the hero's journey. We also disown our stories sometimes by numbing out. Author Barbara Platic says that we are emotion phobic. She said that we have this deep yearning and desire to experience our emotions, to feel. And yet when we become uncomfortable, we tend to back away from that. When we become scared, we tend to back away from that. And so instead, we feel our emotions vicariously through things like reality TV. Now, I'm not bashing reality TV. In fact, if Ben doesn't get rid of Olivia soon, I don't know what I'm going to do. I see those of you who are out there, yeah. Or we watch a horror movie or a slasher movie so that we can feel something, so we can get out of our numbness and actually feel. But what if instead we got out of our numbness and into our lives and felt our stories as they unfold? We also deny our stories when we blame others, when it becomes their fault because we couldn't possibly be a participant in our own lives in that situation where things didn't go so well. Must be them. We become victims to our stories. Or we let other people write them for us, and then we become just characters in their stories instead of main players in our own. This disowning of our stories gives us a false sense of safety because we turn to self-protecting and we choose certainty over curiosity. We choose our armor over our willingness to be vulnerable. And we choose knowing over learning and seeking wisdom. This shutdown comes at a price, because when we don't allow ourselves to be in whatever we're feeling, when we don't allow ourselves to be in the discomfort, in the fear that comes with the journey of being human, then we can never fully experience the whole vibrancy of life. that brings us alive, the juicy parts of our life that allow us to live a life of purpose, a life of joy. You see, it takes a lot of courage to be human, doesn't it? It is a hero's journey. And I love that old saying about ships are safe in the shore, but that's not what ships are made for. Well, we're not made to be bystanders in this lifetime. We're not made to observe our life from the outside, but to be fully engaged in it from the inside. And when we deny those parts of our stories that are tough, that don't look so good, that those times when we're scared, those times when we're sad, those times when we're on our knees because we've been betrayed, when we deny those parts of our stories, we also deny all the attributes that got us through those times. Because each of you are sitting here right now, and that tells me you have courage. It takes courage. And when we move through those difficult times in our life, it is our faith, it is hope, it is strength, it is knowing, it is wisdom, it is compassion, it is forgiveness that sees us through. And it is time for us to acknowledge all those gifts that saw us through, that inner truth that guided us when we were down. Because if we deny that, then when we're in the middle of another story and we can't see the outcome, and we're not feeling so good, and we're discouraged, and we're hopeless, then we can't call upon those attributes we gained the last time we overcame. But when we acknowledge the richness of our lives, when we acknowledge the attributes that saw us through in the difficult times, then we can call upon those same attributes the next time, when we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet. Brene says, if we are brave enough, often enough, we will fall. This is the physics of vulnerability. If we love with our whole hearts, we're going to experience heartbreak. If we try new, innovative things, we're going to fail, maybe more than once. If we risk caring and engaging, we're going to experience disappointment. If we take a stand for something, we're going to experience criticism, judgment, maybe even be ridiculed. But if we are brave enough, often enough, we will prevail. The Epistle of James in the New Testament was written at a time when the Christian Jews were being persecuted for their beliefs. They were wandering through the countryside and suffering from the ridicule of the people who disagreed with what they were teaching and what they were standing for. And the book of James is a book that tells a story of courage. It is an invitation to move into a spiritual wisdom place. The authors of James invite us to step out of our worldly perspective and to look at the journey that these people are taking as an example of persevering. In James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of any kind. That's a big invitation, right? "Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." We are being grown and evolved, continuously being pulled to our good, being pulled to a higher place of understanding and a deeper relationship with God. And if we don't lean into our discomfort and into our fear, we miss that part of the journey. Because each of our stories is unfolding us. and meant to be integrated into our whole being. Brene says, owning our story and loving ourselves through the process is the bravest thing we will ever do. The people that decide to own their stories and reckon with emotion, the people that get uncomfortable and feel the emotional discomfort of facing fear and being vulnerable, are the ones that rise strong. You either walk in your story and own your truth, or you live outside your story hustling for your worthiness. I love that line. You either walk into your story and own your truth, or you live outside your story hustling for your worthiness, because you will always be seeking validation out here until you become comfortable being right here. So how do we own our stories? It's a two-part process. First, we engage with our feelings, and second, we get curious about the story behind those feelings. How do we engage with our feelings? Well, we've talked a little bit about that already. We lean into them. We don't avoid them. We don't step outside of them, but we lean into them, even the tough ones. I love that part in The Power of Now, where Eckhart Tolle talks about the observer, that we are the observer. And when we can allow our emotions to come into our awareness and be fully present to them, we begin to realize that there is a part of us that is observing that, and that allows those emotions to move through us rather than get stuck. We are so afraid sometimes to feel the things that are uncomfortable to feel, but that is because we have built them up into this little ball of unawareness instead of inviting them into the conversation and saying, what is there for me? What do you have to teach me? What do you have to show me? How do you have to grow me? Owning our stories is about not skipping to the end, to the good parts, to the parts where we come out the hero. It's important to acknowledge those too, but owning our stories allows us to acknowledge the courage it takes to walk this walk. It allows us to develop compassion for ourselves and for one another. And it connects us. Think about it. When someone has shared something really deep with you, some story that required them to get vulnerable, some story in which they were authentic and honest and said, yeah, didn't look so pretty. Yeah, I didn't show up the way I wanted to. Isn't there something in that sharing that opens up a part of you that says it's okay to not be okay? It's what connects us as human beings, because we all have shared experiences. They may look differently, but we have common themes and feelings that connect us. So are we willing to live in the arena? Brene says, once we fall in service of being brave, we can never go back. We can't fake it anymore. We now know when we're showing up and when we're hiding out, when we are living our values and when we are not. This new awareness can be invigorating. It can reignite our sense of purpose and remind us of our commitment to wholeheartedness. So we feel our feelings, and then we get curious. We get curious about what's behind them. We get curious about what's contained within them. Why am I being triggered right now? What is this experience showing me? How am I being grown? We get curious. We begin to ask questions. It reminds us that we're alive and that we're in this unfolding process that contains really miraculous understandings when we allow ourselves to fully be in it. So I love probably most of all the part of the book where she talks about curiosity. Because as I've said, I've been hanging around Unity a while, and I know the people I'm dealing with here. And I know that you like to live outside the box, that you're a little bit of a rebel, or you probably wouldn't be sitting here today in this sanctuary at home on your couch, wherever you're watching. And so I think you'll appreciate this invitation to be curious and I think you'll see why it's so important. She says, curiosity is unruly. It doesn't like rules, or at least assumes that all rules are provisional. I feel like she just called me out right there. They're subject to the laceration of a smart question nobody has yet thought to ask. It disdains the approved pathways, preferring diversions, unplanned excursions, impulsive left turns. In short, curiosity is deviant. I think she just called us all deviants. And somehow I'm okay with that. When we walk through our fear, through our pain, and we begin to explore it, when we ask questions of our stories, when we get curious about them, some amazing things happen. She says, embracing the vulnerability it takes to rise up from a fall and grow stronger makes us a little dangerous. People who don't stay down after they fall or are tripped are often troublemakers. Hard to control, which is the best kind of dangerous possible. They are the artists, the innovators, the change makers, and I dare say the people that are sitting right here this morning. Yeah. So every week during this series, I want to highlight someone who has been through a journey, who has overcome. And I came across recently the story of J.R. Martinez. He was a young man who joined the Army in 2002. In 2003, he was deployed to the Middle East. About 3 months into his tour, he was driving a Humvee that hit an IED that was detonated. It burned over 34% of his body. He went through 33 cosmetic surgeries and skin grafts and spent 34 months in military hospitals. Since that point in time, he's gone on to become an actor, a motivational speaker, and a dancer. Some of you may recognize this young man if we have a picture right there. Those fans of Dancing with the Stars will find him familiar. But the thing about JR is, if you've watched him and watched him dance and heard a little bit about his story, he is absolutely a hero. He has absolutely walked the hero's journey. But we can't just skip to the end of the story where he has overcome everything he went through, because he couldn't be that inspirational speaker, that motivational person, without everything that came before that developed the qualities he needed to touch lives. He now works with burn victims, giving them the hope to overcome. He started Operation Finally Home for soldiers who are coming home after an extended period of time, that they may have housing. But you see, before JR learned to dance, his mother had to teach him to walk again for the second time. That part of the story is as important as where he stands right now, just as that part of our stories is important to acknowledge. Sometimes our stories become our purpose, and sometimes our pain becomes our ministry to others. I want you to know this morning that you are all heroes. You all have the courage, you all have the resilience, you all have the strength to overcome anything that is currently happening in your lives. And I invite you to take time today to acknowledge all the paths that you have walked up till this moment. What has seen you through, the truth that has guided you, the love, the compassion that has been there for you, because it will always be there. So on the back of your bulletin is the Manifesto of the Brave and Brokenhearted, and I invite you to take this home and put it up on your fridge. So today you're going to have to take your bulletins with you. But hang on to them, because I think this is important enough that we're going to look at this every week. So as you move through your week, just take a glance at this. Maybe read through it a time or two. If there's any point in time you're feeling discouraged, then pull it out. So I will read it this morning. If you want, you can close your eyes and hear it. You can follow along, whatever works for you. But it's a manifesto that we speak from our hearts. There is no greater threat to the critics and cynics and fearmongers than those of us who are willing to fall because we have learned how to rise. With skinned knees and bruised hearts, we choose owning our stories of struggle over hiding, over hustling, over pretending. When we deny our stories, they define us. When we run from struggle, we are never free. So we turn towards truth and look it in the eye. We will not be characters in our stories, not villains, not victims, not even heroes. We are the authors of our lives. We write our own daring endings. We craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, grace from disappointment, courage from failure. Showing up is our power. Story is our way home. Truth is our song. We are the brave and brokenhearted, and we are rising strong. Amen.